Much is being discussed about the state of play regarding the status of the Hay Chisora boxing bout. What is the position right now, and will the fight take place?
There is absolutely no doubt the fight's going to take place. Everyone be assured of that. It's fully sanctioned, it's fully licensed. Luxembourg are the governing body behind it, as are the WBO and the WBA. So there's absolutely no issues that the fight is going to take place, and it will take place and be regulated in much the same way as any fight in this country under the British Boxing Board of Control will be. If that wasn't the case, we simply wouldn't be involved in it.
And are all the boxers licensed?
All the boxers that take part are licensed and fully medicaled and fully insured. The British Boxing Board of Control have initially, as we all know, put out a release to say that anyone will surrender their licence who takes part in this event. They've since backtracked on that and said anyone who takes part in this event, although they will not stop them taking part in this event, and they made that clear at their AGM last week, they may, underline may, be the subject of some disciplinary action afterwards. We're not quite sure on what basis they can proceed with such action, but that remains to be seen.
Although some in the industry have been arguing that the event should not take place, in many respects the true gauge is what the public feel. With that in mind, how are the tickets going?
Oh, the tickets, I think we'll have a full house on the night, without a doubt. I mean, the initial take-up of tickets was bigger than even we experienced for Mike Tyson in Manchester, in 2000. It's overwhelming initial take-up. I think without a doubt we'll have a full house on the night. That's the least of our concerns, is the sellout. It's all the other stuff, putting all that into place. The tickets, is not an issue. We're going to be full up.
Well, with that in mind, you said that's the least of your concerns. So what are your concerns?
Oh, from my point of view, just the arrangements and getting it all done. I mean, we're now 2.5 weeks away. We're getting into the issues of production and stuff like that. But yeah, other than that, everything's on schedule and ready to go.
And the undercard?
Well, the undercard was announced yesterday. Unfortunately, we lost the Povetkin fight, and that was due to TV scheduling. We obviously have, it's a residential area around Upton Park. We had to go with the local authorities' timings. We'd like to have pushed everything back an hour, but the German TV couldn't accommodate the time slot we had, so they've had to move their fight back to Hamburg, I believe.
Moving on to the dispute, most people within the industry, that's the boxing industry, know that Frank Warren has been a major supporter of the Board of Control and was key to their survival when they were last in difficulty after the Michael Watson court case, which at that time endangered the very existence of the Board of Control. With that in mind, how does the boxing world find itself in a position that one of the key board licence holders and supporters and the British Boxing Board of Control themselves are at loggerheads? Well,
it's basically a matter of talking. There was an initial meeting before this fight was ever signed. Before the negotiations are finished, we had a meeting with the British Boxing Board of Control. We told them we was proposing to do it. We asked them whether they would reconsider whether they wanted to be in or whether they wanted to be out. The chairman said he would come back to us. The next thing we heard about it was when they put the statement out. Therefore, they had the option, talking, working together works, as they say. But unfortunately, the board have taken a stance. And they seem to be forgetting that they withdrew Derek Chisora's licence. They didn't ban him, they didn't suspend him. They told him that he was no longer a member of their club, which is what the board is, it's a club. And he had the right to go and seek a licence elsewhere, which he did. He appealed, he had the right to appeal. They pushed the appeal date back on him. So we feel, to act in a way that would scupper his plans, which they knew about at the time. So he took the option and got licensed elsewhere. What happened in Munich's regretful? Of course it is. No one can say what they did was right, or whether it was good for the sport. No, it wasn't good for the sport. But the bottom line is a man has a right to work. Derek Chisora is a professional boxer. What else is he supposed to do? How is he supposed to get a living? And I don't see why they have taken it so personally. The only thing I think is about territory. The fact that Luxembourg have become the first European body to put on a show in British territory. Now, this has been going on for a number of years in Germany, where Austria work. I think Luxembourg have also promoted in Germany. Italy have had other jurisdictions. They've all done this cross-border thing. But it seems to me the board, who have had stewards attend these shows, it's not like it's a secret. It's not just jumped up on them. It just seems to me that until someone's, if you like, entered their back garden, that they've suddenly become concerned about it. They haven't asked questions about the insurance. They haven't asked questions about the safety aspect, which their duty is the safety of boxers. The safety of the boxers is paramount, absolutely paramount in everything they do and everything we do. And it seems to me they're more interested in the fact that this is going on in London than any other aspect of the show.
Going back to something you said just before, I heard, I don't know if you can shed any light on this, that Charlie Giles worked in Germany recently on behalf of the Austrian Federation. Is there any truth in that?
Well, I don't know that for a fact, but I mean, it's certainly without question that Charlie Giles has not attended a Nathan Cleverley world title fight or a Ricky Burns world title fight in his capacity as chairman of the British Boxing Board of Control for quite some time. But he seems to be a regular fixture at any fight involving the Klitschko's. I wasn't in Germany for the Chisora Klitschko thing, but I mean, people I work with, Dean Powell, Frank, I've got no reason to doubt what was said over there, what was done over there. I was watching it on TV and made my own assumptions of the conduct of the chairman. Derek Chisora wasn't happy. Frank certainly wasn't happy, and there's no secret in that. He said it. But Charlie Giles won't speak about it. He didn't make himself available to be cross-examined at the hearing. He just hid away. I saw him with my own eyes in a back office, not prepared to give. So how they can judge Derek or give him a fair hearing? The EBU have been vocally opposed to Derek being licensed. Charlie Giles is the vice president of the EBU. The WBC have sanctioned Derek and fined him $100,000 without him having the chance of a fair hearing. So the common denominator in these organisations that have come out against Derek Chisora in this fight is Charlie Giles being a vice president, vice chairman, whatever. The WBO and the WBA haven't condemned them. Make up your own mind.
The Board of Control it's a bit confusing, but seems to have threatened all licence holders supporting or assisting this event with some sort of suspension. What sort of pressure does this put you under as event manager, and what do you think will be the long-term effects that this will have on the boxing industry in the UK?
Well, I don't think it's any secret, as again it was said at the AGM, that legal proceedings are about to be issued against the Board of Control on behalf of a number of licence holders who are unhappy with their stance. From my point of view, I'm employed. I have a job to do. I can't say to my employer, I'm not working on this event because I don't agree with it or they don't agree with it, but I'm also a licence holder. I can't find anything in their rules that says that myself as a manager, promoter, matchmaker, whichever licence I may hold, cannot work on this event. So I cannot see how they can bring any disciplinary action against me personally when there's nothing in their rules to say I can't do this.
Well, furthermore, it's obviously a difficult position. Even if as a licence holder you wouldn't desire to work on the event, if your employer asks you to, in a very difficult position to say no, I take it.
Well, I'm in a difficult position, but I'm in a difficult position from the outsider, but I'm absolutely, my mind's made up. I've no reason not to work on this show. I want to work on this show. It's my decision to work on this show. I've not been pressured into it. I'm working on this show. And if the board want to come at me afterwards, so be it. I have no issues there.
Seconds Out has spoken to a number of licence holders, a number of people, even the Board of Control, regarding this upcoming event. There is some thought that amongst some licence holders that there's an element of fear and fear what's going to happen to their livelihoods if they go through with the fight, what's the board are going to do. Some people have even likened it to a form of blackmail or a creation of a climate of fear. Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, I understand it. I mean, for people that are not used to threats of action, threats of sanction, then I can see, absolutely. I'm sure. I mean, if every boxer who wants to fight on this show would fight on this show, would be queuing up to fight on this show if this cloud wasn't hanging over them. And I think the board needs to answer those questions, because as far as I'm concerned, they're stopping boxers earning a living. If the Boxing Board of Control have an ultimate duty of care, a duty of care that, as we all know, they were found not to have exercised in the case of Michael Watson. Their main concern should be, if any British licensed boxer takes part in this show, whether they like the main event or not, are they insured? Are they medically safe? And are the provisions at ringside in accordance to their own? And the answer is yes to every question. To me, that should be their only concern. And to stop a boxer earning a good purse, which they would get on this show, is just plainly wrong. I find it wrong, and I think the board may well regret their stance.
I've spoken to several managers who say, it's a very difficult position because their job is to obtain the best purses for their fighters. And if by fighting on this show they can obtain more money than they could on another show, one of their duties as a manager is to obtain the best, as long as it's safe, the best deal for their fighter. And so by not putting them on this fight, one could argue they wouldn't be performing their duties as manager professionally.
That's absolutely right. That's the position Frank Warren's in. I mean, Frank Warren has a contract with Derek Chisora to provide him with boxing matches, to provide him with an income to the best of his ability. So has he got to put himself in a position of not being able to provide Derek with an income? Has Derek got to find himself in a position where he can't provide for his family? It's just plainly wrong. The board's jurisdiction to regulate boxing, as they said in their initial statement, the safety of boxing is paramount. And that's it. The safety of boxers is paramount. Well, fine. On that one statement alone, they are wrong, because the safety on this tournament will be exactly, if not better, than anything they insist on. And I can say from a personal point of view, as someone who was involved in the Michael Watson promotion and has been involved in the Gerald McClellan promotion and all these different types of promotion, that if I had personally any doubt about the safety implications of this event, I would not be working on it. But I can assure everybody it is exactly the same.
Since this whole incident has blown up with the British Boxing Board of Control, have they in any meaningful way entered into discussions with Frank Warren, with yourself, with Box Nation about how this could be sorted out?
No, not as far as I'm aware. I mean, the AGM last week was pretty vocal and certain questions were asked, but you find yourself with the board, they just won't answer questions with a straight answer. They can't even put out a press statement without having to backtrack on it a couple of weeks later, which suggests to me, and as I say, I'm not a legal brain, but which suggests to me that everything they do is a knee-jerk reaction rather than a thought-out reaction with advice. I mean, before we went forward and getting involved in this fight, all the legal advice was that it was perfectly legal, it complied with all the laws of every governing body and European law, that this is a perfectly legal event. You've got West Ham United, a Premier League football club. They're not going to be involved in illegal events. Newham Council, the Metropolitan Police, there is a massive working party behind any event of this size. These people quite simply would not be involved if this was an illegal event. And for the board to condemn it, call it illegal and all the rest of it is just plainly wrong. And in my eyes, they're misleading the public. I think they're seriously misleading the public. The people that don't know the ins and outs of boxing, don't realise that the board are a self-appointed body. They're a body that regulates, but they don't have any legal standing other than the fact that the licence holders, I suppose, permit them in a way to regulate our sport. Yes, we respect their rules, but some of their rules are just antiquated. The people that are making the rules are out of touch. I think to say they need to come into this century, I personally believe they need to come into the last century first. They can't leapfrog 100 years, and I just think that certain people around that table, I've had experience myself. This is not Frank Warren talking, this is me personally. I have been to many a hearing where, to be perfectly honest, they've been chaired disgracefully. I believe personally, as someone who was outside the hearing in Cardiff, that there was never any doubt what was going to happen to Derek Chisora before he went in there. To me, he was guilty, and he had to go in there and prove why they shouldn't do it. And I don't think that's how a hearing should be heard. I didn't like the way the press were widely advised as to where the hearing was taking place, at what time it was taking place. That within 100 yards of the building, Derek was hounded. I think the board put themselves under a ridiculous amount of pressure to make the decision to satisfy the media, rather than to make the decision in a proper way. They didn't take into account Derek Chisora's frustrations about the various things that were going on behind the scenes. And I ask people to remember, a few months earlier, Derek Chisora was involved in what can only be described as a disgraceful decision in Finland, a disgraceful decision where he was robbed of the European title. I don't know anybody other than the three judges who don't say he was robbed of that European title.
That was the Helenius fight.
The Helenius fight. Now, Derek Chisora came out of that ring. Now, if he is the guy that the board seemed to be painting him as, he didn't kick off there. He didn't verbal anybody. He didn't get involved in any altercation with a judge or anybody else that had just taken away a meaningful title from him. He acted with absolute, in a gentlemanly way. He accepted that it was a bad decision, but it was a decision that's not going to be reversed. Now, To his credit, the guy that accompanied him, representing the British Boxing Board of Control, was a steward called Ron Pavitt of Wales. Now, when Ron Pavitt of Wales arrived in Finland, he stayed with Derek the whole time. He kept, you know, he was there representing him. He was the voice of reason. He calmed him down. He told him how it is, and Derek accepted it. That wasn't there in Germany. He didn't have the backing of his own licensing body.
So who was the licensing body in Germany?
Well, the licensing body from Derek's point of view, the people that gave him permission to box out there was the British Boxing Board of Control. He was the people. They were the people that licensed him. Charlie Giles, or so we assumed, was the British representative of Derek Chisora. Now, as far as I'm aware, and I've been to many overseas fights, where if you do have an issue, that the representative of your commission should back for you. You know, or if you are wrong, tell you are wrong and tell you why you are wrong. You know, as I understand, as I reiterate, I wasn't there, but I understand there was an issue with the bandaging, which I was watching on TV on the night and picked up what was going on. There was the issue of Vladimir Klitschko coming into a dressing room. Nothing wrong with it, but ethically it's not right. There was lots of issues going on. You know, I go back to you know, David Haye when he fought in Germany, when he walks out of the dressing room and through a crowd without any barriers, which you know, it's not right. You know, the British Boxing Board of Control wouldn't allow it in this country, so why did they allow it to happen in there? The common denominator was the person that was out there. We asked the British Boxing Board of Control, I think 2 or 3 occasions in writing, I asked if Mick Collier, the Southern Area chairman, who's got a good rapport with Derek, who Derek respects, would be the British representative for this fight. And for some reason, Charlie Giles became the representative for this fight, a Klitschko fight. I believe, and I stand by this, that if Mick Collier had been out there, I'm not saying that the situation at the weigh-in wouldn't have occurred, because that was the first instance, but I pretty much guarantee you if Mick Collier had been out there, that after the weigh-in, Derek would never have put a foot out of line again, and I really believe that. I just think it was, he needed a firm hand, and I think he didn't get it. I think he got a disservice. I really believe, from my point of view, he got a disservice, and the snowball effect kicked in. He felt he was being, I don't know, screwed, I suppose. He'd been messed around by the Klitschkos for the best part of a year. We know that. The fight was called off twice, cost him a lot of money in training, which they didn't give him back. We feel that they used him to further their negotiations with David Haye. And I think just the frustration boiled over. And the board don't seem to take that as a mitigating circumstance. Yeah, he acted unprofessionally, of course he did. But again, he didn't throw a punch. I've watched the video over and over again. And Derek Chisora doesn't throw a punch. David Haye does. Derek doesn't pick up a camera tripod. David Haye does. You know, David Haye's trainer got punched in the mouth. But, you know, Derek has taken the full sentence. You know, he's taken... Now, David Haye obviously wasn't licensed. We understand that. The board didn't have any sanction against him. But, you know, I go back to this. It's okay, the board's saying, well, you can't do anything against David Haye because we didn't license him. Well, I go back to something I brought up, which concerns me personally, is a few years ago, as we all know, probably the worst scene at a press conference I can remember was when Lennox Lewis and Mike Tyson brawled, you know, threw heavyweight punches at each other in a press conference. The president of the WBC was hurt in the melee. Now, Lennox Lewis was a British licence holder. He wasn't even called. He wasn't even called to explain his actions. Now, I think that was far worse, painted boxing in a far worse way than Haye and Chisora did. Yet Lennox Lewis didn't even get called. Well, why not? And my answer to that, the only answer I can come up with, is because he won the fight. And had they have suspended him, had they have called him up and taken his licence in the way they did Derek Chisora, Lennox Lewis would no doubt have been licensed in America, where he campaigned for most of his career, carried on with that fight, and the board would have lost their revenue. I can't think of any other explanation for that. Now, Derek Chisora gets his licence withdrawn, and if you look at the board's letterhead, Lennox Lewis is now an honorary steward of the board. So, to me, there's no sense in any of this. Herbie Hyde had a fight at a press conference. They didn't take his licence. They allowed the fight to go ahead. This happened after a fight. All these incidents happened before a fight. So if the board are so proud of protecting the image of boxing, why didn't they stop those guys fighting? Why didn't they suspend them and take away their payday? They didn't do it because I believe it's them who's putting revenue before the interest of boxing. Now, that's what they've accused licence holders who were taking part in this event have put in money before the interest of boxing. Well, I put it back on them. In each of those occasions, clearly they put money before the interest of boxing. Otherwise, Lennox Lewis and Mike Tyson wouldn't have happened. Mike Tyson was fined a large amount of money in this country for striking a referee, threatening to eat Lennox Lewis's children. Had the board banned him or suspended him, then Lewis Tyson wouldn't have happened. And I'm sure the board's coffers prove that they were glad it did happen. Now, a senior member of the board said to me when I questioned this many years ago, why wasn't Lennox Lewis called? And his words were, because if he wins and takes a foreign licence, we lose revenue. So these are guys that are accusing everybody else of putting money before the interest of boxing. The whole thing from top to bottom has just become hypocrisy. And for the sake of sitting down and talking, you know, Derek offered them a heavy fine and a suspension. They dismissed it. He actually offered them that. He knew he'd done wrong. And to say he hasn't apologised is wrong. He put out a public statement apologising. You know, the WBC last week, this is the worst thing they've ever seen in boxing. This is condemning it and saying that Derek's behaviour was the worst thing they've ever seen. Well, Jose Sullivan was in the middle of Tyson and Lewis. You know, he threatened to sue them both. So how can he say that? You know, and how can he sit in judgment of someone for a fight he wasn't at? Why wasn't Charlie Giles there? Why didn't the British Boxing Board of Control send a representative there? Why did they even have a hearing when the vice chairman of the WBC is the same guy who's already dealt with it through the board? You know, the whole thing is just, it's kangaroo court after kangaroo court. And how many punishments, how many fines does Derek Chisora need to pay before they allow him to continue with his living?
Box Nation is planning this fight on July the 14th at West Ham Football Ground, Upton Park. How's West Ham been to work with?
I've worked in half a dozen football clubs, Manchester United, Spurs, you name them, Hampden Park, Wembley. I've done most of the big ones. I can honestly say I've never been a West Ham fan. I'm an Arsenal man, but I've now, we've done 2 shows here now, and I'm actually getting a bit of affectionate towards West Ham. The people here are fantastic.